Listen, we saw how podcasts had some role in the election of last year. When I say podcasts are the answer to extreme marketing, that is what I mean. However, you and I are not running for president. That's not on my 2025 bingo card. What's the next year? 2028 bingo card. None of that. However, we can use that in our businesses. And I'm going to give you a case study for exactly how that can look for you. Hey, welcome back to Coffee Chats Podcast. I am so excited for this. Now, anybody who knows me knows that I have been following Morgan DeBaun's career for quite some time. I am a Blavity subscriber, all the things. We're going to put that to the side. All the things are there. So when Morgan DeBaun came out with a book called Rewrite Your Rules, I was watching how she was exploring how to launch this book. I remember seeing it from TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn, how she was going through the process of building her subscriber base or building her interest base for people who would want to buy this book and pre-order the book and be interested in her story. And now that she's actively on tour now, it's interesting to see how that whole thing unraveled, especially since she did not go the self-publishing route. A lot of us are publishing our books ourselves. So to be able to see how that can flow out, I'm not in the publishing industry, but she used podcasts like no other. And I need us to look at what this is. So let me start with this. I'm talking as if everyone knows who Morgan DeBaun is. And I'm not even going to try and come up with a list of all the things because I would just fangirl out. So instead, I'm going to read a little, Black people love to say little, her book jacket description. Morgan DeBaun is the founder and CEO of Blavity Inc., a revolutionary media and tech company serving multicultural consumers. A serial entrepreneur, small business advisor, and corporate board member, DeBaun has become one of the most prominent figures in the modern tech landscape. An icon for ambitious professionals, DeBaun is a prominent voice for those seeking success and balance in a world that often values the grind above all else. If that is not a bio, I don't know what is. Okay, that was whoever wrote that. Bravo to you. When I'm looking at the way that this whole campaign has launched, I haven't seen someone do it as cleverly and as intentional as this woman. Whoever is behind the scenes building all the things, bravo to you. Bravo to you. There are a couple of things that I really want to zone in on for people who podcast hosts, but then also people who are just utilizing the podcast industry as a tool for our business. Podcasts are not going anywhere. They've been here for a while. And within the last, I would say 5 to 6 years, they've seen a surgence or a surge like no other. I think the pandemic had a good amount of to do with that. There are a couple of things that I want us to be able to walk away with in order to truly not just awe and wonder at all of the things that have played a role in this book becoming, I believe maybe a couple of days ago, it became a bestseller, a number one bestseller. Bravo to her. Bravo to the team. That takes a lot of work and a lot of intentionality. And how can we look at the blueprint? There's nothing new under the sun. And I'm a person that looks at the data. I'm a person that looks at what's already been done and how can I put my flavor on it? Because I'm not going to create anything new, not necessarily. Innovation is really us regenerating something that's already been existing. The thought has already been thought in someone's mind. We just have to be daring enough to go and execute it. This was very daring. So the first thing I really want us to, or really want to point out, is we have to get not just stupid clear about who a book is for or what a offer is for, but how different identities will relate to it. Here's what I mean. So I saw Morgan on a whole bunch of different podcasts. Anthony O'Neill's, the Financial Confessions, which is basically financial diets podcast. She was on LinkedIn News podcast. David Shan's, what is the name of his podcast? The Social Proof podcast. All of these have dramatically different people that you are talking to. They have dramatically different audiences. Anthony O'Neill's podcast is very much talking to people, largely Black people, who are focused on financial independence and financial freedom, and how do you build that wealth for ourselves. The Financial Diets, Financial Confessions podcast largely talks to women, I would assume, outside looking in, women between like 28 and probably 35, who are at that prime age of, I want to make sure that I'm utilizing my money and my career and my access in the most strategic way possible. David Shands talks to, it seems like a lot of his audience is based in Atlanta, people who are solo entrepreneurs, people who are side hustlers, people who are utilizing podcasts and content and all these other things in order to also create a version of financial freedom for themselves and be entrepreneurs. Dramatically different audiences. And LinkedIn is kind of self-explanatory. There's a different vibe that you bring to the table when you're engaging with LinkedIn. So the book, I forget how she describes who the book is for, but when she shows up in these different spaces, she's talking to a different version of each person. You're not going to talk about the book or talk about your experience the same way with Anthony O'Neill, the same way that you would with the Financial Diet audience. Dramatically different audiences, dramatically different way of speaking to them. She kept core to who she is, core to her brand, while still playing into what does this audience need to hear from me in order to connect. So getting stupid clear about what the book is for or who the book is for, but then how do you replicate that to a whole group of people? The way I'm talking to Black women in the Southeast is going to be different than how I'm going to talk to Black women in the Midwest. The way I'm talking to middle income or middle class Americans is going to be different for how I'm talking about an issue or about the book to somebody who's in lower income communities or upper class communities. Getting stupid clear about who it's for, but then also how do you communicate that to different identities and different people in various communities. The other thing that I thought was quite crafty is Morgan used the platforms that she already had access to in order to promote the book. Sometimes we assume that, especially if we go into doing big publishers or big house publishers, we assume that they're going to do the legwork to get this book out there for us. And I don't know that is true anymore. Or I don't know if that maybe ever was true. A lot of these publishers want you to have a social presence. A lot of these publishers want you to have an established audience because it's an easier sell. It creates the pipeline for them, if you will. So you notice that, or at least I noticed that Morgan used her website and her own podcast in order to get this book out there. There were other tools as well, social media, of course, but especially her website and her podcast. There was the nerd in me was like, okay, so this .com led into this .com, and this was an automatic transfer to this .com and this domain name, all the things. Very, very crafty. But then two, when you bought a certain amount of books, you got a certain amount of access to resources with Morgan. I think it was something like if you bought 5 or 10 books, you got to apply uh, to be in like live coaching or something to that effect. She used the resources. People are already going on her website for her courses. People are already going on her website to find out about what is the podcast doing. People are already going on the website in order to find out when does her next advising window open. So she used the website. Then the second thing is she utilizes her podcast in a very crafty way. In a very crafty way. Morgan is really good at in person and one on one connections. So she started changing her podcast to do some more live coaching, I believe is what she called it. And with that live coaching, you got people to engage with live content because, again, live content is booming right now. People want to see live stream, especially with the way that AI is coming in. It feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is a real person or not. So she really leaned into that live coaching aspect because people are already listening to the podcast. So let me just double down, create an atmosphere for not only am I launching a book, not only am I still doing the podcast, but here's why you need to be engaged with my story. And here's why you need to lock in, which leads me to my next point, which is leaning into your natural ability. Like I said, Morgan is great, it seems, when she is one on one, being able to share her knowledge with people in person right then and there. She's really good about being I want to say that she's an introvert. So there's a different kind of way that we engage with the world as introverts. So we have to be very keen on how we are utilizing our energy and our resources with our body. So her team leaned into that. Oh, you do well with coaching sessions. This is your thing. Let's lean into that. And that was bravo. So the question is, what natural ability do you have? You don't have to change or shift and become, she didn't have to become Oprah. She didn't have to become, what's her name? She didn't have to become Mel Robbins in order to sell a book. She leaned into who she already was and doubled down on that. And that's a really great asset. The other aspect is giving people not just the book, but an experience. This happens a lot in podcasting as well, which is why you hear a lot of people who are going live, recording live, then turning that live content into a podcast episode. Because you're crafting not just the podcast episode, not just the book, but you're crafting an experience. People want to feel something. I have the book right here. I bought it not only because of, oh, it's another Black woman getting published. I also bought it largely because I loved the experience that was being crafted for me. There was a lot of intentionality behind what are you going to get with this book? What's the result? What's the transformation? What's the impact that is being created here? So what experience are we creating for our people when we're launching books, when we're launching podcasts, when we're launching offers, whatever that thing is? Then I want to cover real quick, let's not scoff at small or starter audiences. The example that I want to mention, LinkedIn News's YouTube channel is not new. It's not, I'm sure that their audio version of, I'm sure they have a audio version of their podcast. Let me check. Or actually, I don't see a audio version of the podcast. If they have it, I don't see it. But specifically, I saw this with their YouTube channel. Their YouTube channel isn't large. From what I saw, they average a couple hundred views per video. Now, that's nothing to scoff at, which is my point. When you are looking to interact with different people to get your message, to get your book, to get your whatever the thing is in front of different people, do not scoff at starter audiences. You don't know who is listening to that podcast. You don't know who is seeing that social post. You don't know who is a part of that person's email list. Don't scoff at the starter audiences. If the person's brand if the business's brand aligns, if they are targeting people that will find your information useful, double down on it. Lean into that. It doesn't matter if you're thinking they only have, I don't know, 100 or 200 subscribers on the YouTube channel. They only have blah, blah, blah. Whatever that thing is, don't you dare, because there was a point in time where you didn't have nearly as many people as you do now. Maybe you're working on building your own stuff as well. Don't scoff at the small or the starter audiences, because that content is evergreen. Podcasts, as long as people keep paying the bill to the podcast host platform, that podcast is going to exist there. Really, those are the people that are going to work the hardest to get in front of the audience. If I'm starting a podcast for the first time, I'm hustling to get in front of the audiences who are going to utilize and take on that information as much as possible, who are going to actually listen to the stuff, not because of my namesake, not because of a household name, but because the information is valuable. And those are the people that are really going to buy the book. And then finally, before we get to our faith note, sell your story, not the book. That was another really good thing that I noticed in all of the I probably have watched every single podcast episode that featured Morgan DeBaun and this book. Probably. And in all of those episodes, I noticed that very little of the time are people, or she or the host or whoever, are they actually talking about the book? They mention it, of course. They talk about it. It's like a little head nod. Yeah, that's a framework I mentioned in the book, or that's a story I talk about in the book. It's there. However, again, like I mentioned in a previous aspect, in a previous note, people buy experiences. People buy trust. People buy, unfortunately, I don't know a different way to phrase it, but people buy you. They want to be able to lean into you. So because I know the history of who Morgan DeBaun is, because I know all the things, or a good portion of the things about her career trajectory, I love the transition that's being offered here. I love the information that's being shared. And I bought the book because I'm invested in the story that's being sold to me, the example of success, the example of triumphantness, if that's a word. Here's some ruminating questions that you could take away from all of this. As we looked at Morgan DeBaun's book launch, she's actively still in, at the time of this recording, she's actively still in book tour mode, and it's going crazy. So here's some questions you should ask yourself. When you're thinking about who the book is for, or who your service or your offering is for, consider how other very specific identities can receive it. If they heard it, how would they absorb that information? Now, you don't have to be for everybody, but how is a Black woman in North Carolina going to receive your information? Statistically or stereotypically, how can you communicate that with them without being prejudiced? And then secondly, what platforms or what resources do you already have access to that you can build on? We don't always have to create something completely new. What do you already have access to? If you have access to 6 people liking your Facebook posts, reach out to those 6 people and say, hey, thank you so much for your continued engagement. Thank you so much for always being locked in. I have something coming out. I wanted to see if this is something that you would be interested in. The third question is, what is something that, yes, you have a platform, but then let's lean into your personality. What does your personality excel with? For example, I am an introvert. I excel best when it's one-to-one conversations because I have time to really zone in. My energy isn't being pulled in all these different directions in front of all these different people, or a group of people, I have a better way of connecting. What is your way of connecting? Are you better when it's in workshop style? Because maybe you should do workshops to promote the book. Are you better in podcasts? Because maybe you should lean into podcasts. Are you better with social media? All the things. What naturally do you do well? Then ask yourself, what experience can I create around this? If you think of, I actually, so sometimes I sign up for different people's lead magnets and different challenges just to see how they are engaging with things. And the best ones that I have engaged with always create an experience. They always create an experience. The information is not new. Who is telling the information and the experience that's being crafted is the only thing that's new. So, what experience are you crafting for other people? And then consider, how can you tell the story rather than selling the product or the features of the thing? I have to be very intentional about this, because sometimes you can think you're telling the story, you can think you're telling the results, but really you're just telling the features. Yeah, I know what a vacuum does. I know it's going to suck up all the dirt on the floor, but is it going to help me with my 2-year-old toddler who keeps throwing their Cheerios on the floor? I don't know. That was a random example. I don't have a 2-year-old toddler, but I thought about vacuums. Then finally consider, what are some varying degrees of audiences that I can tap into? Think of dream connections. Think of people who I would feel nervous asking them to be on their podcast. Think of them and then make the ask anyway. But then also consider, what are some starter people, or what I assume some starter, because sometimes people people assume that, oh, they're starting out, they don't have the metrics to be able to handle this. You're assuming, don't assume. It always makes a fool out of you. But what are some smaller groups, essentially, that you can tap into to build your confidence and to build your interest base? Okay, so I'm done fangirling out about Morgan's book. Or actually, I'm not, because she's a part of the Faith Note too. um, so for those that have never listened to a Coffee Chats podcast episode before, this podcast and the business behind the podcast, iMoves Management, is based on the scripture Matthew 17:20, that speaks to, if you have a faith of even just a mustard seed, you can tell that mountain to go from here to there and it will move. We know that it takes a whole lot of faith in order to engage with business work, to get up every day, even if you're not doing business work, to decide that I'm going to give what I have to offer to the world, my gift, my solution, my result, my transformation. I'm going to have faith that I'm going to interact with somebody that I can change something in their day, because we're not necessarily changing lives, but we can change different aspects of somebody's life. And that's transformational. So it takes a whole lot of faith in order to do that. But scripture tells us that if you have the faith of just a mustard seed, the smallest amount of faith, you're going to be all right. So I end each episode with a faith note, and this one actually comes from the first chapter of Morgan's book, where she speaks to, sometimes the path of least resistance is not the path for us. It doesn't apply to us, if you will. And that made me think about the scripture that speaks about the narrow versus the wide path. Let me pull it up, which is actually Matthew 7:14. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. Sometimes the thing that you're seeing so many other people do and engage with is not for you. You're seeing a whole lot of people on Instagram, or you're seeing a whole lot of people move to TikTok, or you're seeing a whole lot of people creating courses or whatever the thing is. Just because from the outside it looks like it's working doesn't mean, one, that it actually is, but then two, doesn't mean that it's for you. the section in Morgan's book, she speaks to, just because I can easily sign up or apply for a corporate job, or I can easily do the hustle culture, sometimes that's not for you. Sometimes that doesn't apply to you. So when we're thinking about how are we walking the path that is made for us, walking the path that God has paved for us, who's lighting the lamp to our feet, it's going to be a little bit difficult. It's the path. Sometimes it's the path of least resistance, but you're made for it. Because again, faith of just a small mustard seed, you can do anything. If you are planning on launching a book or publishing a book, rather, go back and ask yourself some of these questions, or answer some of these questions, because talk about a stellar podcast launch, or book launch, excuse me. Talk about a stellar book launch. It was so interesting to watch, and it's not over yet. So, all right, y'all.